Joining me live is Richard McGregor, Senior Fellow for East Asia at the Lowy Institute. Thanks very much for your time. Just reflecting on the significance of this change, because this was brought in, Deng Xiaoping brought in the limitations on terms to not repeat what he saw essentially as the cult of Mao. Are we entering the cult of Xi now?
Well, the cult of Xi is very different, I think, from the cult of Mao. There's no doubt there is a cult of Xi, but for one thing, China is much richer, much more powerful, a much bigger military with global interests. Mao wasn't like that. Mao's China wasn't like that. I think also Xi is quite different from Mao. Mao had a kind of anarchic streak. You know, he destabilized the Communist Party, whereas Xi's done exactly the opposite. He has made the party itself much more powerful, so it's a much more challenging instrument of power, both at home and abroad. So there's similarities, but I don't overdo them personally.
Okay, fair enough. In terms of this change, though, I suppose, the third term's been secured. There's been so much commentary in the lead up to this that various things, whether it be some of the Chinese aggression in the South China Sea or zero COVID policy, whatever it might be, that everything had to be going swimmingly for President Xi to make sure he got this third term. Does he relax a little bit now? Or is this now having the power to use how he would like to?
Much more the latter. No relaxing. All the messages are exactly the opposite out of this party congress. The first thing, you mentioned Mao previously. Even Mao always had opponents within the leadership. Xi now has basically none. The top leadership inner sanctum, the Politburo Standing Committee, which was just shown in your report, they are all Xi loyalists now. He's made no gesture to any other rival groupings, factional views and the like. Everybody's got to be on board with his program. And I think his speech says it's all shoulders to the wheel. They're going to step up and accelerate. Doesn't mean they can actually do what they want to do, particularly with the economy in trouble, but there's no relaxation.
That's interesting you note on there, the economy. Just in a demographic sense, China feels like it's essentially at or near its peak. 70% of China's population is working age, but that trend's not going to be their friend. People are going to live longer. That's great for people, but makes it tricky to support them, obviously, in retirement. And then you have the next generation, which just is not getting replenished at the same rate. And we know migration is negative at the moment. How big a ticking time bomb is this for President Xi? Could he look back at now and say, well, it all got harder from here?
Well, possibly. It's an interesting question. I mean, the biggest economic problem at this minute is COVID zero, which is really crushing the economy, and there's no easy way out of them. There's the demographics, as you mentioned. China is going to lose about 30, 40 million people of working age by 2030. That's a lot of people. So they're going to have less output and more sort of retirees to feed, with a pretty average pension system and a pretty average public health system. Their productivity is not high. They continue to grow their economy largely by investing at home, and they're getting less bang for their buck for every dollar they spend there. So that's why Xi is focused almost entirely on technology. That's the game changer for him. It makes China a more powerful country, gets leverage over the United States, and also transforms the economy. But of course, that's not guaranteed.
And militarily, Taiwan is the question that looms, I suppose, the loudest. How do you see the likelihood for how all of this plays out and any other regional issues in the next, well, I guess, while he remains in power?
Well, I mean, Xi has made it clear. He hasn't put a firm deadline on Taiwan, but he said he has made it clear it's not going to be a legacy issue. Now, let's assume that he stays for 2 more terms. That brings us out to about 2032. You would expect something to have happened by then. Now, China's military, I think, probably could take Taiwan now one way or the other if all things went well. They certainly are greater numerically than the United States in the region, and getting more so every day. But the Chinese don't want to fight a war over Taiwan, because they know how absolutely disastrous that could be on many levels, quite apart from more losing it or struggling to win, as has happened in Ukraine. There's many ways to skin the cat. You can have a blockade. You can just create pressure on Taiwan to negotiate and agree in principle, as it were, on unification of some kind. But, China's given up on seducing Taiwan. People in Taiwan are not interested in being ruled by Beijing. So it's very hard to see a happy ending here.
Yes, because you sort of allude to Ukraine. That's one thing, taking, which might be difficult. It's another thing altogether, holding, which, if the populace is as determined as their recent levels show, would be very difficult and problematic. Just finally, there was this vision of Hu Jintao being escorted during this third term, the confirmation of the third term. I guess there's a symbolism there, and you alluded to before who's next? Is Li Qiang the next, theoretically, that would take over from President Xi, given he was second in line, walking into the hall behind him, or is that just so far off it's a question that's not really worth trying to answer right now?
Well, I think it's absolutely a question worth asking, because China had basically solved the succession issue, which was very difficult. Few authoritarian countries managed to do it, but they did it. Now, Xi has thrown that solution out the window with the end of term limits. So if he were to, he's 69, he used to be a smoker, he's a little bit overweight, anything could happen. And if he did happen to pass away suddenly or become incapacitated, it's not clear who would take over. In theory, it's the number two person, Li Qiang, but according to the party rules, he doesn't get it automatically. And so I think it's a big problem, succession, potentially, if there's infighting and there's a split at the top, and that's what the party really fears. Yes,
and that it seems a long way off now. As you say, you never know what might happen, not just his health, but obviously economic situation as well. Richard McGregor, great to get your thoughts today. Thank you.